It's done.
They humiliated the black CEO on a plane, but the entire
Good.
airline
Now we
ended
can
up
finally
paying
relax.
the price. The flight was fully booked that afternoon, and the cabin buzzed with the quiet hum of conversation, the rustle of magazines, and the occasional clink of coffee cups. Among the passengers sat a black CEO, returning from a critical business trip that had consumed weeks of her life. She carried herself with quiet confidence, her posture straight, her gaze calm yet observant, dressed in a professional, understated outfit that spoke of authority without arrogance. Her laptop bag rested neatly by her feet, and her tablet displayed urgent documents that needed her immediate attention. Almost immediately, a few passengers began whispering, casting judgmental looks and making thinly veiled comments about her presence in first class. Their tones sharp and dismissive, as if she were an intruder in a space they considered reserved for someone more deserving. The atmosphere subtly shifted, a tension that was palpable to anyone paying attention. Yet she remained composed, immersing herself in her work, her fingers moving swiftly across the screen as emails poured in with updates demanding critical decisions. Little did these passengers know that she was not just any executive. She was the head of a multi-million-dollar company with clients spanning continents, contracts worth millions, and a reputation built on relentless dedication. A flight attendant approached, her tone slightly condescending, asking her to double-check her ticket and implying she might be in the wrong section. She smiled politely, nodding, but internally a spark of indignation flared, a recognition of the subtle humiliation being attempted. She took a slow breath, letting the moment pass without outwardly acknowledging it, her composure unshaken, her mind already calculating the steps she would take if the disrespect escalated. Around her, other passengers began to sense the tension, some glancing nervously between the CEO and the flight attendants, realizing that something unusual was unfolding. The murmurs grew louder, with one passenger making a particularly pointed remark about her place in the cabin, expecting perhaps a defensive reaction. Instead, she remained silent, her calm a quiet power that only made the would-be mockers appear smaller in comparison. Her phone buzzed again, the screen lighting up with urgent emails, financial updates, and client messages, reminders of the immense responsibility she bore and the high stakes waiting for her on the ground. She responded swiftly to a few pressing matters, her multitasking seamless, a demonstration of the control she wielded over her empire even from 30,000 feet above the ground. Observing the scene, she noted the names of the flight attendants, the expressions of the passengers, the subtle cues of bias and judgment, storing every detail. She knew that the real power was not in immediate confrontation, but in strategy, in turning this small, ignorant attempt at humiliation into a lesson they would never forget. The flight continued, the engines humming steadily. As she sat upright and composed, a silent force in first class, fully aware of her worth, her influence, and the undeniable authority she carried even in the face of ignorance and prejudice. The tension in the cabin escalated as the group of passengers who had initially whispered behind her back became bolder, their voices rising in sharp, unnecessary tones, questioning her presence in first class as if her success were a personal affront to them. They made pointed remarks, sneering and smirking, insinuating that she did not belong in the space they considered their exclusive domain, their words laced with entitlement and ignorance. The flight crew hovered nearby, uncertain and hesitant, clearly caught between following protocol and placating the aggressive passengers, their discomfort growing with every raised voice. She remained perfectly still, her posture calm and composed, her eyes scanning each person methodically, cataloging their behavior with a quiet, strategic patience that masked the fire building inside her. Around her, tension rippled through the cabin like an invisible current, reaching the other passengers who had tried to avoid noticing the confrontation. Whispers of concern and uneasy glances passed between them, a subtle recognition that the situation was becoming increasingly volatile. The group's attacks became more personal, mocking her appearance, her attire, even the fact that she was calmly working on her laptop, treating her professionalism as something to ridicule. Yet she did not respond, understanding that any direct confrontation could escalate the conflict in ways that might damage her dignity or create a scene that the airline could manipulate to minimize their own liability. She knew that the true power was not in shouting back, but in watching, analyzing, and waiting for the moment when the imbalance of authority would shift unmistakably in her favor. Every snide remark, every judgmental glare, every condescending comment was carefully stored in her memory, a thread in a tapestry she was quietly weaving, one that would soon expose the ignorance and arrogance of those attempting to humiliate her. As the minutes passed, the cabin grew increasingly uncomfortable, some passengers shifting in their seats, avoiding eye contact, sensing the growing discord and the invisible tension radiating from her calm demeanor. Even the flight attendants who had initially hesitated began to realize that they were part of a scenario far larger than a simple passenger dispute, and unease flickered across their faces as they noticed the subtle confidence she exuded, the quiet authority that did not need to be announced but was undeniably present. She continued to type on her laptop, respond to emails, and remain fully composed, an embodiment of control and patience, her silence a powerful counter to the ignorance surrounding her. The more the group tried to provoke her, the more apparent it became to everyone that they had underestimated the woman sitting quietly, seemingly unbothered, but in reality entirely in command of the situation. Their arrogance was creating a trap of their own making, and every passenger in the cabin, even those who had initially ignored the tension, began to sense that the humiliation they sought to impose would soon turn in ways they could never anticipate, setting the stage for a reckoning that extended far beyond the cabin of the plane. Once the plane reached cruising altitude, she calmly pulled out her phone, her fingers moving swiftly as she contacted her assistant, outlining the situation with precision and clarity, leaving no detail overlooked. Every insult, every condescending remark, every dismissive glance from the passengers and flight attendants was catalogued in her mind as she dictated notes and evidence, knowing exactly how to leverage the situation. Moments later, she reached the airline's corporate office, her voice steady and professional, describing the mistreatment she had endured, the clear bias displayed by the staff, and the inappropriate behavior of certain passengers, her tone leaving no room for doubt about the seriousness of the matter. Within minutes, the airline began to realize that this was no ordinary complaint. They were dealing with someone of remarkable influence and authority, whose power extended far beyond the confines of a single flight. While the airline scrambled internally to assess the situation, she remained composed, her posture relaxed yet commanding, exuding an unmistakable air of control that drew the attention of other passengers who had previously watched the confrontation unfold with curiosity. She continued to respond to urgent work emails, her multitasking seamless, all the while subtly signaling to the airline's management that the narrative was now in her hands. By the halfway point of the flight, executives and senior staff had mobilized, sending instructions to the flight crew and preparing to meet her immediately upon landing, fully aware that mishandling the situation could have serious repercussions for their company. Throughout the journey, she maintained a quiet vigilance, observing the passengers who had attempted to humiliate her, noting their discomfort as they realized the power dynamic had shifted completely. They whispered among themselves, casting furtive glances, unsure how to reconcile the woman they had mocked with the undeniable authority she now radiated. Her presence was magnetic, commanding attention without raising her voice, and her calm efficiency left no doubt that she was entirely in control. As the plane began its descent, her assistant confirmed that executives and security personnel were waiting, ready to address the situation with the seriousness it demanded. The passengers who had tried to provoke her sat in stunned silence as the realization set in. The woman they had attempted to belittle was not only unharmed but had orchestrated events in a way that demonstrated her dominance, her influence, and her capacity to turn the tables entirely. When the doors opened and she walked down the aisle, her steps were measured, her poise impeccable, and the expressions on the faces of those who had mocked her revealed shock, disbelief, and a dawning respect. The narrative had shifted completely. She was no longer a target of humiliation, but the central figure commanding attention, authority, and accountability. In that moment, the passengers, the flight crew, and even the airline executives recognized that the power of composure, strategic thinking, and undeniable influence could transform a moment of attempted disrespect into a demonstration of dominance. leaving an indelible impression that would echo far beyond the cabin of that flight. After the plane touched down, the atmosphere shifted immediately, as the airline's management quickly realized the gravity of the situation and took swift, unprecedented action to address the misconduct that had occurred on board. The CEO, calm and composed, disembarked with quiet authority, her presence commanding attention as executives, senior staff, and security personnel approached, fully aware that they were dealing with someone whose influence extended far beyond any ordinary passenger complaint. The airline issued a public acknowledgement of the mishandling, releasing official statements apologizing not only to her but to every passenger affected by the incident, emphasizing a renewed commitment to professional conduct, inclusivity, and the prevention of discrimination. Internally, senior staff received direct reprimands, and new protocols were rapidly implemented to ensure that bias, negligence, or inappropriate behavior of any kind would no longer be tolerated in their operations. News of the incident spread quickly across media outlets, capturing national attention as reporters highlighted the story of a black CEO who had been targeted with disrespect, yet responded with unmatched composure, strategic thinking, and decisive action, turning a potential humiliation into a lesson in accountability and corporate responsibility. Social media buzzed with admiration for her professionalism, the way she handled the situation without losing control, and the quiet, commanding presence that had shifted the power dynamic completely in her favor. Meanwhile, the passengers who had attempted to undermine her sat in stunned silence, confronted with the reality that they had grossly underestimated her influence, authority, and capacity to turn the tables with such precision and dignity. Their earlier arrogance now seemed painfully naive, and whispers of embarrassment and regret filled their ears as they realized the consequences of their actions extended far beyond a single flight. The CEO continued her day with unwavering focus, attending critical meetings, signing contracts, and managing her business empire as though nothing had occurred, demonstrating that true power does not need to assert itself loudly. It is the quiet competence, the strategic foresight, and the ability to act decisively that commands respect. Throughout the aftermath, her story became a symbol of resilience, dignity, and the cost of underestimating someone based on prejudice or superficial judgments, inspiring countless others who witnessed her poise and authority. Airline executives were forced to acknowledge publicly that mishandling incidents of bias could damage reputations, client trust, and employee morale, and they committed to widespread reforms that would impact every level of their operations. In the end, the CEO left a lasting impression not only on those who had tried to humiliate her, but on everyone who witnessed her response, reinforcing the undeniable truth that respect cannot be demanded through fear or position alone, but must be earned through action, integrity, and an unwavering understanding of one's own worth, leaving behind a story that would resonate for years as an example of the transformative power of composure, intelligence, and unshakable authority.